Nearly 20 years ago, Honda launched the first modern gasoline-electric hybrid in the United States with the first generation Insight. But for 2019, we have a very different Insight. This is also all new, but it actually shares a lot with the Honda Civic. The Insight is part of Honda's electrification strategy because by 2023, they're telling us that 2/3 of their models will be electrified in some form, either hybrids, mild hybrid, or full EV. But at the moment in the US, there are really just three main models from the Honda brand. We have the Clarity series of electric and hybrid vehicles, the Honda Accord hybrid, and now this all-new Insight hybrid. Although there are rumors of an upcoming Honda CR-V hybrid, we don't have any details yet. Up front, the Insight definitely looks like a member of the Honda family. We have this strong chrome bar that runs across the front. It actually kind of bisects the headlamp module right there. These are full LED headlamps in every Insight model, and top-end trims also get LED fog lights lower. At the bottom of the headlamp module, we have the LED daytime running lamp strip, and at the top, we have the turn signal. You can see that over there on that side. At the bottom of the bumper, we have a standard radar sensor, and we also have a standard camera right back here behind the windscreen. That's because all Insight models include Honda's latest Honda Sensing System Standard. That gives us radar adaptive cruise control, autonomous braking, road departure mitigation, lane keeping assistance, etc. Honda's aggressive move to put their latest active safety technologies in every trim really improves the base model value of the Insight, because when you compare this to the competition, except of course for the Toyota Prius, these systems are going to be about $1,000 value that you won't find on your average compact sedan or actually even the average hybrid in this segment like the Ioniq or the Niro. Although again, the Toyota Prius does have software that is very similar to what we see in Honda Sensing Standard. When designing the Insight, Honda decided to go in a slightly different direction than Hyundai or Toyota. So this is actually a sedan. We have a trunk right back here, not a lift back like we find in the Ioniq or the Prius. In addition to that, this is very solidly a compact-sized sedan in America at 183.6 inches long. This actually is a little bit on the long side for the compact segment in general, but notably larger than a Prius or an Ioniq, which are actually on the small side of things for the compact segment. They're actually a little bit closer to the subcompact segment in some ways. This is a full 7 inches longer than the Hyundai Ioniq, and the back seats are the main beneficiary of all that extra space. Of course, overall packaging efficiency is a little bit lower in a sedan than a liftback, and that's why we don't find the cargo room back there that we do find in the Toyota or the Hyundai. Aside from the more aerodynamic wheels we find on this vehicle, and of course this hybrid badge right here on the front quarter panel, this doesn't look as unusual as the other hybrids in America. The Ioniq and the Prius definitely have a very distinctive shape, and this looks more like your average compact sedan. Out back, the overall design is a little bit more Accord than Civic. Honda says that was deliberate because they're targeting kind of a different audience with the Insight than the Civic. They're telling us that they see this vehicle as being a little bit more premium, especially than the base models of the Civic. So we have combination LED tail lamp modules. That means that these are not full LED. Things like the turn signal lamps and the backup lights are still incandescent. The hybrid system under this hood is very different than the hybrid systems that we found in previous generation Insights. Things start out with a 1.5-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine that produces 107 horsepower and 99 pound-feet of torque all on its own. It is basically the same 1.5-liter engine that we find in the Honda Clarity. On the other side of the engine bay over there, we have two electric motor generator units. The first one generates power. It's directly connected to the engine. The other one is directly connected to the wheels, and it helps move the car forward. The electric motor on that far side of the car is good for 129 horsepower and 197 pound-feet of torque. When everything is working together, the system can generate a maximum of 151 horsepower and 197 pound-feet of torque and is good for 52 miles per gallon combined. Power is fed to that electric motor unit on the far side, obviously by the engine and the generator unit under the hood, but also by a lithium-ion battery pack that is under the rear seats and has a usable capacity of probably around 1 kilowatt hour or so, although Honda has not told us specifically. Honda's hybrid system requires a little bit of explanation because this hybrid system operates very differently than what you find under the hood of the Prius or the Ioniq. Depending on how you want to look at it, this vehicle actually lacks a traditional transmission. We have the engine on the one side with the generator unit, and then we have the electric motor on the other side. Below approximately 45 to 50 miles an hour or so, this vehicle can only operate as a serial hybrid. The engine on this side generates power with the generator unit, sends that electrically over to the motor on that side, which powers the front wheels. In that mode, you can only get 129 horsepower and 197 pound-feet of torque. Above about 50 miles an hour or so, they actually can connect a clutch pack between the generator unit and the motor unit, so the engine can directly power the front wheels, or it can assist the electric motor in powering the front wheels, depending on exactly what your power demands are. Honda does this to improve efficiency out on the highway. So if you're doing steady state highway travel at 55 or 65 miles an hour, it's going to keep that coupling closed so that way the engine can power the wheels directly. But if you start climbing a hill, it is actually going to uncouple that coupling at most speeds, so the engine can rev up and give you more torque and more power over here for the electric motor. The key thing to know about this system is that serial hybrid mode operation. Some people have complained that the engine speed does not always seem linked to the vehicle speed or the vehicle acceleration that's requested, and that is exactly because this is that true serial hybrid system. Depending on exactly what you're asking of the engine, you may be asking for more torque, so you're not necessarily accelerating, but you're climbing a hill, so the engine's going to have to speed up to make more power to send over to the motor so that you can climb that hill. In a way, depending on how you want to look at this, you're basically trading horsepower over here in the engine for torque over there on the electric motor. Some people like to call this hybrid system an eCVT, but that's also what some people call the system in the Toyota Prius and Ford hybrids, and of course the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid, but I don't think it describes exactly how this system works all that well. Overall front seat comfort is good, but I don't think these seats are as comfortable as top-end seats in the Honda Civic. The big thing is that we don't have any adjustable lumbar support over here on the driver's seat, and we actually don't find power seats until you get into the top-end trim. It's also worth noting that the front passenger seat does not have the same range of motion as the driver's seat, even in this touring model. The big difference is that the seat bottom cushion on the passenger side simply moves forwards and backwards. It does not adjust for height or tilt. The driver gets a tilt telescopic steering column with a moderate range of motion, making it easier for shorter or taller drivers to find a good driving position. Hopping in the back seat, we have a generous amount of legroom with this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. But if I try and sit upright back here, my head does touch the ceiling. Now, if you're the kind of person that slouches a little bit, then you'd be able to put your head back there on the headrest, but that's just not something that I could do. Keeping in mind that this is a compact vehicle, not a mid-sized vehicle, the rear bench is a little bit narrower, obviously, than something like an Accord or a Camry. If I move over here to the middle seat, headroom is a little bit limited. If I move all the way over to the right seat, where this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, I still have about an inch of legroom left. This is a very generously sized interior, really. If you get the base model of the Insight, then the rear seat will fold as one piece, but the other trims get a split 60/40 folding seat back, and we have a large trunk pass-through because the battery in the Insight is actually right here under the rear seats, and that may be why rear headroom is a little bit more limited than some of the other compact sedans in America, because they wouldn't have that battery under there. When it comes to overall cargo efficiency, there is a compromise for giving this vehicle a traditional trunk, because a Prius or an Ioniq would be able to use all of the space from behind the rear seats, including what's behind that rear parcel shelf area, for cargo, but we can't do that in the Insight. So if we open this trunk lid, we find 15.1 cubic feet of storage space. That's on the high side for a compact sedan, but it is notably below the Prius at 24 cubic feet, and of course the Ioniq up there around 26. On the flip side, of course, you'll actually be able to put about 50% more cargo back here than you will in a Chevy Volt, because that's right around 10.6 cubic feet. This cargo area is very deep as well, and I was able to put a 22-inch roller bag in that position and still very easily close the trunk lid, as you can see right there. So even though this is not quite as large as the Prius's cargo area, it actually is still very practical. You could very easily put 24-inch roller bags on their side. You can see if I put the 22-inch bag, there's still a great deal of space there, and they do go fairly far back. Because Honda was able to put the battery under the rear seats, there is no battery intrusion in the trunk, so we still get that large cargo pass-through that I showed you earlier, and still the option of those 60/40 folding rear seats. By default, we do not have a spare tire under the load floor. Instead, we get a tire inflator kit, some extra storage areas right under there, and this is also where you'd find the jack, etc. But if I lift this foam section out of here, you'll notice that we actually have a spare tire well under there, and all the hardware required to put a spare tire in this vehicle. That's because Honda is telling us you will be able to buy a spare tire from the dealer as a dealer sold accessory, and then it will just go right there into the cargo well. The reason we don't find a spare tire from the factory is that spare tires add weight to the vehicle, and that weight would cause 0 to 60 acceleration times to increase, and of course fuel economy to decrease. So by removing the spare tire, they give you better fuel economy, but fortunately Honda is one of the few companies that lets you choose whether you want a spare or not, because they do give you a place to put one if you want to buy one aftermarket. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in a top-end touring trim, so we have that Honda Link telematics button right there. We have a moonroof right up top. Goes over to just the driver and front passengers' heads because it's a pretty standard sized moonroof. We have height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger and two-way adjustable headrests. Our model has the leather upholstery, which is again available only in that top-end touring trim, and the leather is perforated, although these seats are not ventilated. As we see in some of Honda's other models, we have moderate bolstering right there on the front seats to help hold you in place. And if we move on over to the front door panels, we find a reasonable amount of soft touch material for a compact sedan. The upper section and this middle section are all made from soft touch materials, and we have a soft touch armrest, but as we work our way down lower on the door, we do find hard plastics, for instance, right around that bottle holder. The overall style of the interior is somewhat conservative, so if you're looking for a hybrid that doesn't scream hybrid, this is definitely going to be a solid option. We have two large air vents right here in the center of the dash, a center channel speaker above that if you get the top end model. We have more soft touch materials down lower on the dashboard, and then we have a fairly large bin style glove compartment. I was able to easily fit a large tablet computer inside there. Since we're driving a touring trim, this has the 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration. It also has the factory navigation database, as you can see right there. No hybrid would be complete without a power meter, so you can click that button and see where your power is going and what your fuel economy is like. If you want to know more about this infotainment system, we have a complete video on this generation of Honda's infotainment system. We'll go into it in a little greater detail when we can get our hands on this car for a complete week. Below that, we have the optional dual zone automatic climate control. We don't find that on all trims. Keyless go right over there. Button for the heated seats on either side. Then we have two USB inputs and an auxiliary power output. I have an iPhone 7 Plus. You can see it very easily fits right there, but this slot does not support wireless charging. To the left of that, we have the typical Honda button arrangement for the shifter that we see in other vehicles. Reverse is this back button right there, drive, neutral, and of course, park. We then have an electric parking brake, auto brake hold, economy button, sport button, and EV button, very much like Honda's other hybrids. Between the front seats, we find a center console with two large cup holders. This armrest slides forward and backward to help cover that area, or you can actually open it up, and then this is actually one very large area. You can remove the divider there for the cup holders. You can remove this little sliding divider as well, and then we have access to a very deep and large storage compartment. The instrument cluster is a partial LCD cluster, so we have a physical tachometer over here on the right, some LED gauges for the fuel level and then battery level, and then pretty much everything else you're seeing from this blue gauge over here on the left all the way over to that LKAS icon, that's all being delivered by that LCD. The LCD gives you additional readouts. We have the safety systems, maintenance, driver attention, driving support, traffic sign information, navigation, turn-by-turn directions, audio phone information, etc. Fuel economy displays right like that, as well as a range and fuel economy display. We've been doing a lot of things parked. That's why the fuel economy is so low at the moment. And the display changes just a little bit if you put the vehicle into sport mode. You can see that we get this red tint right over here in this line that arcs over the instrument cluster. Again, it goes to the regular color if you put it back in eco mode. The steering wheel is a 3-spoke design with fairly aggressive sport grips on top. You'll notice that we actually have paddles on the back of the steering wheel. These do not control shifts because we don't have stepped gears in this drivetrain. Instead, these control the regenerative braking. So if you want less regen braking, we pull this paddle over here on the left. If you want more regen, we pull this one over here on the right. On the left side of the wheel, we find our volume up, down, and track forward, backward toggle. The home button, this rotary knob, and the back button control that multifunction LCD cluster. So with that home button, you can rotate around options right like that, click down to enter, then we have a back button. We then find some dedicated phone buttons and a voice command button at the bottom. And on the other side of the steering wheel, we find the buttons for the standard radar adaptive cruise control. We hit the main button here, speed up, down, cancel, distance, and then the lane keep assistance enable and disable button. Because the Insight produces more power than the average compact hybrid in America, performance is notably better than those competitors. So this is definitely faster 0 to 60 than the Toyota Prius or the Hyundai Ioniq. We clocked 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds in our preliminary tests. If you want to go faster 0 to 60 in a hybrid, then you will have to get something like the Camry hybrid or the Accord hybrid. Those will go a little bit faster, especially the Accord hybrid. It is important to remember that although the combined system horsepower of this hybrid system is just over 150 horsepower, it actually cannot produce that maximum under about 50 miles an hour or so. And that's just due to the overall design of this hybrid system. It is a serial hybrid only below 45 miles an hour. Above 45 miles an hour approximately, it can involve the engine, but it may not necessarily do that depending on exactly what you're asking of the hybrid system. And the reason for that is because once you close that mechanical clutch, you may actually reduce your total system horsepower depending on exactly how fast the vehicle's going, the engine would be spinning, etc. And that's why we don't see 0 to 60 times in this vehicle down around 7 seconds or 7.5. It's up there closer to 8 seconds, but still, again, notably faster than the Prius or the Hyundai Ioniq. Keeping in mind that all of these scores are preliminary, of course, because we aren't testing this on our usual home test course, I'm going to guess that braking is going to be in the 125-foot range. That's pretty average for the compact sedan segment, and I suspect this is going to be right in that average group. We have 215-width tires on all versions of the Insight in America, and those are a little bit on the narrow side for a top-end compact car. You will find compact cars with 225 width tires, but it's not as small as some of the hybrids out there either. So for instance, a Hyundai Ioniq may have tires as narrow as 205s depending on the trim level that you get. Tires obviously have an impact on overall vehicle efficiency, and that's why we see reduced tire widths even in top-end trims of the Insight like we're driving here. Overall handling ability in the Insight is quite good, and that of course is logical because this is heavily based on the Honda Civic. So this drives like the Honda Civic, which is to say one of the best compact cars in America. There's not a lot of steering feel coming back from the road, but the steering is very accurate, and the chassis definitely has what it takes to handle well out on your favorite winding mountain road. Overall handling ability is not going to be quite as good as some of the competition. I actually think that the Ioniq may beat this in top-end trims when it comes to overall handling. That's mainly because of the tire choice on that particular model. If you were to put wider or grippier tires on this, then this is likely going to be the best in the segment. This is the kind of hybrid that would be an awful lot of fun if you decided to grab some wheels and tires off of a Honda Civic Si, for instance, and drop them right here on the Insight and create sort of like your own Civic Si. I think this would actually be an awful lot of fun when the road starts to bend. The Insight also has a good blend of handling ability and a decent compliant ride. This is not the softest vehicle in the compact sedan segment, but it's not going to jar your teeth out on rough pavement either. As with many compact vehicles, the suspension is going to be a little bit firmer than the next size category up. So if you're looking for a softer, more compliant highway ride, then the Accord hybrid is going to be a better option for you. But I think, again, this is a pretty good balance between ride and handling. Overall cabin noise is a little bit higher than some entries in this segment, although wind noise and road noise are very well controlled. Most of the noise you get in the cabin is engine noise, and that has been something that a number of our viewers have complained about in Honda hybrids before. The reason is because of the design of this hybrid system. Because this is a serial hybrid system below, again, 45 or 50 miles an hour, the relationship between the RPM of the engine and the acceleration or wheel speed in the vehicle may not always be linear, because the engine is not directly powering the wheels. Again, the engine is powering that generator, the generator is powering the electric motor, and that is what is driving the vehicle forward. Once you understand that, I think it's not really a problem. It doesn't bother me at all, honestly, but I do know that some people out there dislike the way that this hybrid system feels or the way the hybrid system sounds. So you may want to spend some time at a dealer driving it around, decide if it's right for you. Because of the overall design of this system and the way that it trades horsepower for torque, basically by spinning that engine up, you will also find that this system climbs hills with the engine spinning a little bit faster than something like the Ioniq or the Toyota Prius. Remember that this 1.5-liter Atkinson cycle engine does not produce that much power, so in order to get to the 150 horsepower total, it's pulling power from the battery, and the engine is of course generating extra power, sending that to the electric motor. In terms of overall fuel economy, we have been getting excellent economy in the Insight, between about 45 and about 54 miles per gallon, depending on exactly how we've been driving this. If you start driving this gently out on your favorite country road like this, it is very easy to get over 50 miles per gallon on average. Honda's two-motor hybrid system has proven very, very efficient, especially at moderate driving speeds. However, like we see in the Accord and the Clarity hybrids, if you start going faster, for instance, in Texas with those 80 or 85 mile an hour speed limits, then your fuel economy is going to start dropping. That's because of that fixed relationship between the engine and the wheels when this vehicle is operating in engine power mode. If you do find yourself driving frequently at those higher highway speeds, then you may want to look at the Prius or the Ioniq. But for the average American, you're going to get just about as good a fuel economy in the Insight, the Prius, and the Ioniq, but this is going to be a little bit more fun to drive. Overall, this is exactly what you'd expect out of a Honda hybrid. We have a fun-to-drive nature borrowed from the Civic. We have the high-efficiency hybrid system borrowed from their dedicated hybrid platform, the Clarity, with bits that were custom designed for the Insight, of course. So the battery pack, the electric motor unit, those are a little bit different than we find in the Clarity, but they're all very closely related. Honda tells us that you'll be able to get your hands on the Insight starting June 29th, and supplies at dealers should ramp up pretty quickly because this is actually made in Indiana, not in Japan, and the hybrid system under the hood is also made in the United States. The base model Insight will start at $22,830. That will get you 52 miles per gallon combined. That's just a little bit more expensive than the base Hyundai Ioniq, which starts at $22,200 and gets you 58 miles per gallon combined. The Ioniq will have a larger cargo area, but it won't have an interior that is quite as premium or quite as comfortable, and the back seat doesn't have quite as much room. But the big difference, of course, is performance, because this will be about a second and a half faster 0 to 60. We get considerably more power out of this system than in the Ioniq. Versus a Toyota Prius, this is actually going to be less expensive while giving you the same EPA combined rating of 52 miles per gallon. That Prius is going to cost you $23,475. The base model will come with 16-inch alloy wheels. Again, the Honda sensing system will be standard. That's something that we don't find on the Ioniq. The Ioniq also won't have the LED headlamps, which are standard on the Insight as well. The 7-inch instrument cluster is also standard, as is a 6-speaker audio system, but most notably Apple CarPlay and Android Auto won't be found on that base model. You do have to step up to the EX trim. I suspect that the EX trim at $24,060 is going to be the most popular version of the Insight because it gives you a great deal more equipment. We get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, the 8-inch infotainment system, XM satellite radio, HD radio, the 60/40 folding rear seat instead of one that folds as one piece. We also get smart entry and keyless go. I spent most of my time out here in the Touring trim, which starts at $28,090. That gives you everything that we're seeing in this model: the leather upholstery, the navigation software, fog lamps, power seats, 2-zone climate control, etc. That puts the top-end pricing of the Insight definitely in the same neighborhood as top-end pricing in the Ioniq or the Prius, the two most direct competitors, but also very similar to the Kia Niro. In our recent review of the Ioniq and the Ioniq plug-in hybrid, I said that the Ioniq is the first no-compromises hybrid in America. I think the Insight is the second, and it actually may beat that model when it comes to the no-compromises part, especially if you're looking at something that is a sedan, not a liftback. We have very similar savings over a period of 4 or 5 years. This is going to be about $600 a year less expensive to operate than the average compact sedan in America. So based on that, your average payback time for the base model versus something like a Hyundai Elantra or actually a Honda Civic in base form should be about 3 to 4 years. Because of the lower sticker price, that payback time is shorter versus the Toyota Prius, and it's definitely shorter than hybrids of the past. In the past, you could say, yes, my hybrid will eventually save me money, but you also had to say things like it gives up a little bit when it comes to handling, interior comfort, creature comforts, overall style, etc. And that's not the case with the Insight. I actually think this is better looking on the outside than the Honda Civic sedan. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. And it handles like a Honda Civic because underneath the skin, it actually is very closely related. And that's a really good thing for a hybrid in this category. If you were to put wider tires in this vehicle, it would definitely handle like upper end trims of the Honda Civic or upper end trims of the Hyundai Ioniq, which is also an excellent handling option in this segment. Both this and the Ioniq will definitely outhandle the Prius. You will, of course, have to wait until we can get our hands on one so we can do our usual battery of tests and give you our complete findings. But I suspect this actually may knock the Hyundai Ioniq out of top place in the compact sedan category. I previously said if you're looking for a good compact sedan in America, just skip the regular sedan models, get a Hyundai Ioniq instead. The only area where this really falls behind the Ioniq is in cargo capacity because of the actual trunk we find here rather than the liftback that we find in the back of the Hyundai. Now that said, I think the truest competitor to this is not the Ioniq or the Prius. I actually think it's the Accord Hybrid. You will find that on the same dealer lot as the Insight, and it will cost you $2,330 more for the Accord Hybrid. You will have to give up 5 miles per gallon in combined fuel economy, but you gain a 212 horsepower hybrid system that will go 0 to 60 faster than this. I think it actually handles just a little bit better than this depending on the trim level of Accord Hybrid that you get, and the interior definitely feels a bit more premium. Now obviously you have to trade a few features. You won't find all the interior gadgets and goodies for that low base price in the Accord Hybrid, but depending on what you're looking for, that may be a good alternative for you. Let me know what you think about that as well down there in the comment section below. Now, of course, a $2,330 jump is over 10% more expensive than the Insight, so do keep that in mind. When it comes to overall value, I think the Insight and the Accord are very similar, but the Accord is definitely going to cost you more. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen. If you haven't already done so, click up there to the top of your screen if you want to support this channel, and definitely find us over at facebook.com/AlexNautos so you can see what I'm driving this week.